Hello and welcome to episode 16 of the Retro Game Gauntlet Reviewcast. I'm your host Torsvik, and this week I played Princess Tomato in the Salad Kingdom for the NES. This is going to be a weird one, but let's see what we can do about it. Princess Tomato in the Salad Kingdom is an adventure game, if I might use the genre loosely, developed by Hudson and released in 1988. In Princess Tomato in the Salad Kingdom, you will play as the valiant questing Sir Cucumber. As the brave Sir Cucumber, you will seek to overthrow the evil Minister Pumpkin and rescue Princess Tomato. As Sir Cucumber, you will have to move to places, look at things, check stuff, talk to people, take stuff, use things, give things, buy things to give and use, hit things, fight dudes, praise things, littering, item, and Percy. Outside the list of actions, there's not too much to talk about this game, so let's start talking about some meta stuff. First, the state of this review. I kind of feel bad reviewing this game because, warning, it's not going to get a very good review. The reason is it straddles the fence between visual novel and video game. Princess Tomato in the Salad Kingdom actually was first released on the MSX, PC-88, and a couple other Japanese home computers. I'm by no stretch a visual novel historian, but from what I quickly can glean on a brief look, they both have similar roots from the classic Zork-styled adventure game. As a guess, I would say the old text adventure progressively changed as better tech allowed for graphical depictions of rooms, especially with the addition of the mouse. Now that the writer was freed up from no longer having to describe each room, they could then focus more on interactions like dialogue. To simplify both the design for the devs and the players, many developers began to use action buttons. The major split largely begins here. Some developers use this new style to introduce more complex puzzles, like KGB for the Amiga, whereas others further simplified the gameplay until it became the more recognizable branching path style of visual novel. Princess Tomato in the Salad Kingdom leans on the latter side of that fork. There are arguably few, if any, puzzles in this game, and I have no problem criticizing puzzles if it did have them, bringing me to my second point, and that is that there's not too much to talk about in the breakdown. There's not much to say for controls, and almost anything there is to talk about will be inseparable from criticism that I would normally reserve for the analysis section. I also usually give a brief play-by-play of the plot, either in the intro or the breakdown, wherever it fits best, but I won't be doing that this time around. Normally I can't be arsed about spoilers, but problem is, as a comedy visual novel, twists and turns are about all the game has to offer. I may as well just recite a Rodney Dangerfield routine with about the same tone you would have if you were reading from a children's joke book. This game is cute and I suggest checking it out, but keep a spoiler-free guide on hand at every roadblock. You'll understand why as we move into the breakdown. I'll start with the easy bit, a quick overview of the actions. Let's go with Hasty. Move changes rooms. Look gives you a description of the current room, occasionally revealing a new object, sometimes after multiple looks. Check gives you a description of an object, sometimes also revealing a new object, and again, sometimes only after multiple checks. Talk starts dialogue with other characters. Take adds objects to your inventory. Use is specifically to do actions with items in your inventory. Same for give, but for interacting with characters. Functionally, buys a specific kind of take. Hit is not for combat, rather it functions more as a use for objects that are not in your inventory. Fight starts up a rock, paper, scissors section, more on that later. Praise, I think, only ever gets used twice. This action probably should have been dropped from the game, but it's usually obvious when it needs to be used, and it makes the button layout symmetrical, and if we didn't have button symmetry, my OCD would get triggered, so I won't complain. Dump drops items, another button that probably could have been removed by getting rid of some of the dead end items, and dropping more items on the chapter transitions. Item lists the items in your inventory, probably again not a necessary button, but I would probably appreciate it if I had walked away from the game for about a week or so. Finally, the Percy button. I won't go in depth with the Percy button. It's kind of a wildcard button that both is for comedic, progression, and hint purposes. I'll summarize it by saying Percy is Sir Cucumber's squire and that you should push the Percy button twice in every room and anytime you get stuck. An interesting element, the game actually has 3... Wait, yo, is that Octoberry? What up, dude? What was I saying? Oh yeah, there's 3 modes. Naturally, the adventure style takes up the lion's share of gameplay, but there are 2 other events. There are first-person mazes. These mazes function like wizardry or many of the early D&D video games such as Pool of Radiance and Eye of the Beholder. Unlike these games, there are no random events. Everything, including combat, is predetermined. The combat also has a unique function. In combat, you will play rock, paper, scissors, and look away. From what I can tell, the combat is only semi-random and on occasion completely predictable. Many fights will favor rock, paper, or scissors or a specific direction. In the case of the final boss, he actually has a specific order that you need to learn during your adventures. There's not too much more to say here, so let's crack open this coconut in the analysis. I think that there's actually a lot to glean from this game. I'll be tossing out some tough criticism, but I find that some of these elements seem obvious and many of you, the viewer, have probably experienced them before. These lessons are not unique to the adventure genre either. You can apply many of these criticisms to any dialogue-heavy games, most notably JRPGs. The first thing I'll talk about is probably also the most egregious: repeating actions. Often you will be asked to perform actions multiple times in order to progress. The most common way to encounter this is through multiple dialogues. You probably have experienced this problem in a JRPG. There's some character that you need to talk to 2 or more times in order to progress the plot. If this is not made apparent, you can get stuck wandering the town, desperately trying to trigger an event. I seem to specifically remember having this problem and a similar problem, which I'll be covering in a bit, several times in Lunar Eternal Blue. As a basic rule, never do this. If you need to, here's a few approaches you can take. First, the comedic angle. Make the player want to repeat their actions. This isn't perfect, but it can work. The best example would be with a belligerent character. Here's an example to how it might look. Don't bother me again or I'll punch you. Did you think I was joking? I'm not in the mood, guy. Listen, I don't need the cops on me again. I'll give you the $5 if you just take off. Another method is to give leading statements. We're in luck because Princess Tomato in the Salad Kingdom has examples of both a bad and a less bad approach. Notice the variation in their messages. Action 1, Action 2, Action 3, Action 4, Action 5, and Action 6. I'll round it off with my preferred method, directly communicating to the player. Have some sort of visual cue to express to the player that there are no more actions to be taken. Try something like graying out dialogue, or in the example of a 3D game, you might have some sort of indicator above interactable objects. Just change its color or shape when that object is highlighted. To make one last point, you should probably never require more than 3 repeat actions, let alone 2, unless it's expressly for comedic purposes. I'll cover a similar point next: obscure or easily bypassed triggers. I'll demonstrate this in one of the worst parts of the game. Here's a minimalist map of the penultimate chapter, at least the relevant rooms. In order to progress, you need to pass through specific doors. These doors are completely inconspicuous and there is no indication that you need to pass through these doors. The problem is that this is not a puzzle. It's easy to accidentally go through a different door while exploring, so the trigger to advance the plot is never met. While exploring, you could easily just take the wrong exit while exploring, and you would be none the wiser. And there's quite a lot of this in Princess Tomato. My tip for dealing with this? Just never have it. Vague triggers should only be avoidable through exploits. The game doesn't have any more problems, but the game is almost made up entirely of the 2 problems I've listed. There is some good things though, and I've not really encountered this before, to my recollection. There are lesser side quests and events that will give you hints. The closest thing I can think of off the top of my head would be the whale game in Riven, but that is semi-necessary. You could probably derive the information it's trying to send you elsewhere, but it's the obvious intended method. Even still, the whale game isn't giving you a hint, it's kind of the intended solution to a larger, more abstract puzzle. I think this is actually a really good element to have in adventure games. and I'd like to see it employed more. It might be more employed in something like, say, the Police Quest series or something that I'm less familiar with, so maybe I just don't know. Playing this game was a lot of fun, and I would suggest that you check it out, but from a design standpoint, it straddles the fence between adventure game and visual novel, making it not very good as either. So with a heavy heart, I'll slap on a big ol' 2 on 5 sticker. Anyway, I'll close this out with a shill. Go ahead and smash that approve button and thumb vote this video likewise. I post a poll every weekend to decide what game I'll play next on my Twitter. If you would like to see me playing the Gauntlet games live, you can find me on Twitch. Links for all this stuff will be in the description. Intro and outro is Caligula by Windows 96.